The budget format has long been a classic staple of the TCG space, allowing new players to pay just a little bit and open the door to a brand new hobby. For example, Magic the Gathering has the Pauper format, and Pokemon, well, technically everything's kind of cheap in Pokemon. You can basically get a deck for 2 colored pencils and a bus pass at this point. But Yu-Gi-Oh has whatever Yu-Gi-Oh does. The point is that budget formats allow new players to just pay a little bit and try out your new TCG and maybe fall in love with it. So when Flesh and Blood fully revealed their newest budget format in the form of Silver Age and featured competitive pre-constructed decks at only $20, most people said, hey, that's great. But I thought, how much lower can we actually go? What if you could get 2 decks for the price of 1? Or more specifically, what if you could play the same deck with 2 heroes? And that, my dear viewer, is what I present to you. This is the official, unofficial reveal of what I am dubbing as a brand new product line, the Duel Deck. That's right, the Duel Deck is here, and in this case, it's the Riptide Aelia Duel Deck. The idea came to me to create a 40-card list with the requisite equipment and weapon needed to play as either Riptide or Aelia. And it happened when I was playing this exact list as Aelia, and I thought to myself, hey, would that work for Riptide? Spoiler alert, it does. And the craziest part is that you can build this list and buy it online and have it shipped to you to play with 2 different heroes for $10, shipping included. That's right, that is $5 a deck if you wanted to think about it like that. So anyway, let me explain to you how this list functions, how you would play it for either Riptide or for Aelia, and then show you how I built it in paper from the cards in my closet. So this list was originally built as an Aelia list, taking advantage of the ability to flip off the top of the deck and dominate arrows. And in a format that is very honest and all about math and blocking correctly, having dominate on big arrows with on hits is quite powerful. Not to say that Riptide doesn't do his own powerful things with this same list, but it started as an Aelia list. And in this list, we have a bunch of different very powerful arrows, including a rainbow of Bolton shots. Do remember that in Silver Age, you can only play commons and rares, but Rangers are uniquely suited in this format to play very powerful cards and to do some very strong things because of their commons and rares. So in total, in the 40-card deck, we have 22 different arrows. We have 2 copies of Ravenous Rabble, rounding out our attack actions. And then the rest is just full of pumps. We have all these powerful pumps, some of which allow us to look at the top of our deck so that we can see if we want to flip into it, or manipulate perhaps in some way, shape, or form our own hand or the top of the deck so that we can again flip into dominated arrows. And then of course we have 2 copies of Tar Pit Trap because this card is so good into most heroes, and at the very least it allows us to stop some crazy on hit that might come our way. And while Aelia is looking to close the game out via dominated arrows fairly early, Riptide is actually playing a slightly different game. He's looking for these ultra-wide multi-arrow turns off of the back of Bolton Shot and Falcon Wing, Ravenous Rabble, and so on and so forth. The fact that you can play a buff and then load an arrow means that Falcon Wing and Bolton Shot are all so much easier to use because you don't have to load them via Death Dealer, and so he can play 2 to 3 arrow turns just about every turn. And if he has to, he can resort to a simple block 2 cards and then play 2 cards game plan, giving him like a 2-card 7 value type turn. And so he has the capacity to play big attacks, but he can also go a lot wider thanks to his own hero effect. So here's some example gameplay using Aelia as the hero for the list, and we are up against a Dromai, which is traditionally not a good matchup for Aelia and Rangers in general because we don't have a ton of ways to kill dragons on the board. So we want to try and go as fast as possible, hence why we load off of Death Dealer and then blind flip, hoping to hit an arrow for the dominate, and we get it, so that we can now send dominated damage through with this Swift Shot. Swift Shot's going to come across for 10 with Dominate, and technically Go Again, leaving us an action point, but we are pretty much content to arsenal Dry Powder Shot. It's not a great arsenal, but we can bounce it back with our headpiece and use it either to pitch it or block with it on our opponent's turn. But our opponent is actually going to activate Glory Seeker here, pitching 3 cards from their hand to draw a card and create 3 ash, which means we can actually load this Dry Powder Shot face up to get the +2 buff and +1 from our arm piece so that we can send an extra 6 damage. This is great for us because we want to deal as much damage up front as possible, and our opponent is likely going to take 2 more from the Bloodrot Pox token sitting on their side of the field. Looking at the hand that we draw up into, we do have a lot of different ways to find dominated damage. We've got Ravenous Rabble, which peeks the top of our deck. We've got Scout the Periphery, which also looks at the top of the deck. Spire Sniping, we can load and then look at the top of our deck, and we can do that off of Blossom of Spring so that we can have an arrow to flip into. There's lots of ways we can try to find an arrow off the top. So we are more than content to just take all the damage in the world here, allow our opponent to just send whatever they want. Maybe we'll chip in a block with our Blade Beckoner Boots and pass on over to our turn where we want to try and push more damage over the top. Remember, our opponent's going to take 2 from the Bloodrot Pox token. Obviously, they can't keep an arsenal because of the Inertia token. So we're going to start by loading with Death Dealer off of the essentially Tunic trigger, off of the Blossom of Spring. And we are going to find an arrow on the top, and a good one at that. So the question then becomes, how do we want to sequence? We have 3 buffs. We just drew into a second copy of Nimblism. We know that Dry Powder Shot's on the top there. And so we're going to send that arrow for, the Ravenous Rabble, I should say, for 4 so that we can follow it up with an arrow. And we have a decision to make here because we're going to flip into the Dominate, but if we, normally we want to keep a buff for the arsenal to play a longer game, but in this case, if we play all of our buffs and just play everything out, we're putting them on either dying on this turn or having Sand Cover in hand, because they can block a card plus Blade Beckoner Boots themselves, and then they would have to have Sand Cover, otherwise they're dead. And if they don't have Sand Cover right now, we win the game. And if they do, then the game goes another turn. And it turns out we just win the game. And then on the Riptide side of things, if you want to play as Riptide, here's a game with Zen as the opponent, and they get to kick things off. They're going to start fast and furious by throwing a bunch of damage. We want to block the Flex Claws because we don't want them to have an extra attacking card in the form of a Crouching Tiger, and plus it would enable this, I think it's Mauling Key, Pouncing Key, one of the two. It's a key that gets +1 and Go Again, basically. So we want to avoid that as well, and we can kick this turn off very well by drawing into a new card, arsenaling the Infecting Shot, and look at this. We've got a ton of buffs, and we can just stack up buff on buff on buff here. We do need to keep 1 to actually pitch into sending the Infecting Shot, so we will do that. It leaves us without an arsenal, but this is going to present 14 damage and double proc on the Bloodrot Pox token. So basically, we're asking our opponent if they want to take massive damage or give us literally all tempo. And this happens a lot with this deck, where if we go second, we can just push an insane amount of damage on one arrow or multiple arrows, and usually the opponent recognizes that it behooves them to just block it out, giving us full tempo. Now on this turn, we have a variety of things we can do. We're going to start by loading and seeing what's on the top, drawing, I should say, what's on the top with that Swift Shot, which is going to have Go Again. And keep in mind, we do have the resources to arsenal and play the Spire Sniping thanks to the Ravenous Rabble. But we also just drew into a buff, which means we can hide that information a little bit more with 4 Go Again into playing the buff, into playing the Spire Sniping for 7. So that was 4 + 4 + 7, 15 damage off of 4 cards, technically 5 because we did draw 1. So off of a 5-card hand that we didn't quite know what we were going to draw into, and yet we had a bunch of damage. Our opponent wanted to play out their turn. Maybe they had some awkward blocks, but they take all the way down to 9. So at this point, they can have a pretty large turn, but they're going to have to get through 19 plus whatever we have blocking in our hand. And looking at our own hand, we've got a Tar Pit Trap. We've got a Take Aim and an Infecting Shot, and we can pay to load that Take Aim with Death Dealer, maybe draw another buff off of the pitch of the Spire Sniping. So here we just kind of throw out blocks whenever we feel like we can get most value out of it. Using the tar pit trap here is not going to be very effective. And in fact, against most ninjas, it's difficult to find a time to use tar pit trap effectively because they have so many instances of like 1 damage and 2 damage that they can dance around the effect of the tar pit trap more easily than it would at first appear. So here we just use it to block a full 3 and move on with our lives. They send 2 with the Crouching Tiger. They have a very strong turn overall. But they're going to end up, it looks like, arsenaling that last card as they're thinking about it. And that gives us the opportunity to load an infecting shot here. We do end up drawing 2 buffs. The question is, do we want to play both of these buffs or arsenal one of them? And with our opponent at 8, I think it's better for us to present 11 than it is just to present 8 and keep an arsenal, because it requires them to block with more cards from hand. And in this case, if they don't block, they die. And it looks like they only blocked 2 cards, went down to 2, and the Bloodrot Pox threatens lethal on their turn. So yeah, they were stuck with non-block cards in hand. And this is kind of how we want to go against someone like Zen, who can really just pop off out of nowhere. We need to put them on a low life total quickly so that we can cede control and tempo of the game. Now, we drew up into a crazy good hand. And it doesn't look like a crazy good hand because it has no buffs, but as long as they don't present lethal against us, we're just going to take everything that they throw at us, because we can go Ravenous Rabble, load Falcon Wing off of Riptide, play Falcon Wing, that threatens lethal twice. Then we can load a Bolt and Shot off of pitching the Bolt and Shot with Death Dealer, drawing hopefully a buff, and it turns out it is going to be a buff because it's Nimblism on the top of the deck. So we're sending 4 + 3 + 7 to present lethal, and our opponent has to block everything because they are officially at 1 after leaking against that breakpoint. And loading here, drawing into the Nimblism, sending a 7 over the top is going to close this game out. They have no other recourse unless they, for some reason, have a block in their hand, and it looks like they don't even have that. They've got an Energy. And after playing this deck list, I was so smitten with it that I went and dug through my bulk and created the actual list itself. And it was even better than I expected, because here's the cool thing. This Riptide and this Aelia are double-sided because they came together in token form in Outsiders. So it was like, this is so providential. You can put this list together with a double-sided token and just play both heroes. All of these cards were relatively easy to source. The same thing is true of the Driftwood Quiver and the Crow's Nest. The hardest thing to find is honestly like Bullseye Bracers, because it was only printed in Arcane Rising. But the deck just plays. It just does itself. You can grab the tokens, and you got all your arrows. I mean, this is like an easy deck to put together. You could pick it up on TCG Player or MinMax Games, and you throw it down on the table, and it just sings, man. It works so well. And like I said, I was so smitten by this list, by this deck, I had to do some arts and crafts. So I grabbed a deck box template, hopped into Dollar Store Photoshop, whipped this up, printed it out, and painstakingly cut it out by hand. Just like that. Yeah, so maybe this is a little over the top, but I just think that this is so fun. It's such a cool idea for a product. Why not make a deck that can be 2 decks in 1? Especially when you already have the infrastructure in place to do exactly that. This is something I think that LSS and Flesh and Blood could actually pull off, and I think it would be really cool to see something like this hit the shelves, because, like I said, they've already got the stuff in place to do it, and the format in place now to do it as well. So what do you think? Do you think that LSS should make dual decks? Do you think this is a good idea, and should we do it again? Let me know in a comment below. And if you want to see more videos like this and other weird stuff I've created, I would recommend subscribing, making the number go to the other number right down there, because this is not the only thing I've been working on. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.